So you can see the different properties up at the top: reflexive, symmetric, transitive. It applies to these congruent triangles just like anything else. So what is a congruent triangle? Or what are two congruent triangles? What has to be the same? Yep. All of the angles have to be the same. Okay? So all the angles of the individual triangles have to be the same, and all of the sides of the individual triangles have to be the same. Okay? So let's look at what that looks like. Okay? Oops. Oh my gosh, I'm struggling. There we go. All right. So let's look at number 1. Okay, so number 1 and 2 asks us to identify all the parts of the congruent identify all pairs of congruent corresponding parts, then write another congruent statement for the polygons. Okay, so essentially what we have to do is say, since they are congruent, we have to say that all of the angles match and all of the sides match. Okay, order is important. Okay, so on number 1, when it says triangle PQR is congruent to triangle STU, order is important. That means P matches S, Q matches T, and R matches U. So order matters. Okay, so as we are writing our pairs of congruent corresponding parts, let's start with the angles. Okay, so since P and S come first, I would say angle P is congruent to angle S. Q and T are next, so angle Q is congruent to angle T. And then R and U are last, so angle R is congruent to angle U. Okay? So there we have our angles, and they have to match exactly. Okay? Whatever comes first in the first listing has to come first in the second listing. Okay, those pairs have to match that way. And then we can also say the sides. So again, angle or order matters. So the first 2 letters, remember we always name sides with 2 letters. So the first 2 letters would be PQ and ST. So then I can say PQ, segment PQ is congruent to segment ST. Okay, then we go with QR. So what would QR be congruent to? TU. And then we go with the third, RP. And RP would be congruent to US. Okay, so when you have congruent triangles, you know all 3 sets of angles should be congruent. All 3 sets of sides should be congruent. Okay. And then it says write another congruent statement for the polygon. So all you literally have to do, is just shift over 1. So instead of saying it's PQR, so that we all are on the same page, let's just say QRP. So just start in the middle, go QRP. It doesn't honestly matter what order you go in, as long as the order follows the first and second both. Okay, so if we say QRP, so triangle QRP is congruent to, then since I started with Q on the first triangle, I'm going to have to start with T on the second triangle. So triangle TUS. Okay. All right, number 2 is slightly different, but pretty much the same. Now you have a polygon, so a 4-sided shape rather than a 3-sided triangle. Okay, I don't know why I said polygon. A quadrilateral, right? 4-sided quadrilateral rather than triangles. So I want you to do this same thing, but I want you to do it for number 2. Okay, so you're going to list out 4 sets of angles, 4 sets of sides, and then write a new congruency statement. Okay. All right, I'll give you guys a few minutes to do that. Go ahead. Okay, so you can check up on the board. I listed out the 4 sets of angles, the 4 sets of sides, and then my new congruency statement. There are a variety of things you could put here. but I'll just shift over one and do B, C, D, A. Is congruent to shift over one, F, G, H, E. I found, after doing this time and time and time again, it's really just easiest. If you're consistent and do it the same way every time, it just kind of helps to not confuse yourself, okay? All right. Can I get a comfort level on how we're feeling right now? 3, 2, 1, 0. No thumbs. 3, 2, 1, 0. Good. Okay, now let's apply it. Okay, so it's good that I can recognize and write out the pieces. It's another thing to actually use them in a geometry problem, okay? So things I have to be careful of. When I am matching up side to side or anything like that, or angle to angle, I have to make sure that I'm matching up corresponding parts, okay? So I see that I need X. So right here is not angle X. I need this X value right here, right? So this angle marker is in Y. What corresponds with Y? So I come up here. Y is in the second spot, right? So I come over here. The second spot is S. So that means this 2x minus 20 should be congruent to whatever S is. And luckily for us, S is labeled as 30. Okay? It's not always that way. Sometimes it's conveniently marked for you. Sometimes you got to do a little bit more work. Okay? But I can say, since this corresponds with this, right? Y and S correspond, that they should be congruent. So then I can go ahead and write out my problem. So I have 2x minus 20 should be equivalent to 30. Then I can solve down to find x. So I add 20 to both sides. I get 2x equals 50. I divide by 2 on both sides, and I end up with x is 25. Okay, so there's half of my answer. Now I also need y. Okay, so let's find my y. So my y is right here. Oh, I don't want the pen. I want the highlighter. There we go. So y is right here, 3y plus 9. And that's this side right here, right? ST or TS, however you want to say it. So we got to figure out what ST matches with. So if I come up here to my written out statement, looks like ST is the last two letters. So the last two letters would be YZ. So I need to come over here and find YZ. YZ is this piece right here. Okay, that piece is not labeled, but can we deduct what that YZ piece is? What is it? 15. And how do you know that? Congruency markers, right? So I can bring my 15 over because of the congruency markers. So this right here is 15. So then I can say, now that I have corresponding parts, I can say that 3y plus 9 should be equal or equivalent to 15. Okay, subtract 9 from both sides, I end up with 3y equals 6. Divide by 3 on both sides, and I end up with y equals 2. Okay, so make sure you get corresponding parts. Then you can use those to find the pieces of information that you need. Okay, go ahead and do 4 with your groups. Go ahead and do 4 with your groups. All right, guys, so it looks like we first need to find x, right? So x matches with angle A right here, okay? So then we come up to our statement and we say A corresponds with E. So luckily E is labeled for us with that 108. So I can go ahead and set up an equation there. So I have 60 plus 8x equals 108. Subtract 60 from both sides and I end up with 8x equals, what would that be, 48? 48. Okay, divide by 8 on both sides and I end up with x is 6. Okay, so I have my x value. I can plug it in up here, so 3 times 6 is 18, right? Okay, so that's 8y minus 18. That part is angle G, right? So G corresponds with C, which again, luckily for us, C is marked. So I can write my second equation. So I have 8y minus 18 after I plug in the 6 in for x should be equal to 62. So I add 18 to both sides. I end up with 8y equals, what would that be, 80? And y is 10. Okay. All right, any questions?